let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show. We got a couple of people with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Scott. My Grommr username is softcubby and on Instagram, and I've been gaining for almost a year about right now, and I'm enjoying it and meeting people in the community.
I'm Austin, Grommr username Geneticub. I've been part of this community for well over a decade now, but have kind of been, in and out fluidly exploring it more in depth for, I'm going to say roughly in the 3 to 4-ish year mark now. Yeah.
Nice. So, obviously, the premise of today is talking about what I think for a long time has been a bit of a gainer fable, the freshman 15. And before we really dig into the meat of today, Tim, I mean, from your experience, like when you were sort of first aware of the community, was the idea of the freshman 15 like such a huge thing, either from like a gainer sexy standpoint or as like a sort of trope of like you're gonna gain weight when you're in college type of thing?
Yeah, because I think that's what gave birth to Beefy Frat. I think that was literally the entire purpose of Beefy Frat was it was supposed to be for college guys that were putting on weight. So the freshman 15 was definitely a pervasive trope. It wound up in a lot of gainer fiction. A lot of guys worked into their usernames back in the day. Some of them even became famous under usernames like that. So yeah, it's kind of something that we've never been able to get away from.
Okay. So as an introductory question, and you don't have to give too many terrible details if you don't wish to, but let's ask the question like this. With regards to what each of y'all are studying at the moment, is that field of study sort of prolific as being an area in which people have a tendency to do a lot of long hours at the library or studying, and therefore there's a lot of propensity for weight gain? Or is it maybe something where there's not so much of that?
I mean, I have some thoughts on this because it's a pretty even mix of both, actually. So I got my degree in molecular biology and I graduated this very recently this year, and further pursuing graduate studies in the vague medical field, not going to specify here, but in some form of medicine. And that inherently is going to lead to, yes, a lot of time spent like hunched over my computer, like practicing whatever kind of screwed chemistry questions I got, or physics or something like that, reading up, studying hard. And so in that element, yes, of course, it is going to be conducive towards perhaps some more easy ways to gain, we shall say, right? And some kind of stress eating elements in there too. But that's, it's fine. It's a source of comfort in some ways. But equally, at the same time, in studying biology at this depth and preparing myself for a career in the medical field, I'm also confronted constantly with health consequences, essentially, and learning kind of the ins and outs of, really essentially what I'm doing to myself in some ways at the molecular level. So it's been a constant journey of kind of like reconciling the truth of the matter, and so I guess the biological truth of the matter versus navigating the best way to live life for me.
Yeah, I would say for my experience, since I'm in a different field, I'm doing liberal arts major. That is a little different, just because I don't think liberal arts majors in general, we don't have really courses that really allow you to like really be hunched over and just studying constantly. It's a little bit more just like group projects and open, less studying and more experience building. So it doesn't really have that same feel of like I gotta study for 10 hours. So because of that, I don't think there really is I don't think there's anything prolific about there's no opinion essentially about the major. Essentially, yeah, I feel like the major itself, there's no stance on it because everyone just kind of goes to class and then once you're out of class, you're doing something else. So it's not necessarily like it's not the same college culture, I guess, where for STEM majors.
And Tim, like when you were in nursing school, I mean, like is there a trope of like nurses studying and getting fat as fuck? Like,
No, I mean, there's definitely a ton of fat nurses. I mean, I'm assuming so for most of my career, I didn't have an opportunity to really sit and just get sentient and like
well,
not have
you're on your
anything to
feet all the
do.
time.
On my feet all the time, like for 12, 14, 16 hours on my feet on the floor, having to go in and out of patients' rooms and whatnot. But there are plenty of jobs where nurses do sit for the majority of the time, and I guess the snacking is what leads to the weight gain. But in terms of like nursing students getting fat, no, because you're probably not eating from stress. You're probably like self-diagnosing all these things because as you're learning about them, you're becoming like the worst patient because you're just like Munchausen by proxying everything. And I don't know, this whole trope is just, I think it really rises out of this concept of like the suburbanite kid that goes to college. He's on an unlimited meal plan and takes full advantage of it and is like doing something really super easy in terms of major. And yeah, that's probably a cross section of certain college graduates, but like, obviously not everybody chooses the easy major. So
I mean, I would certainly say like I was frustrated at university for that reason because why would I expect my experience to be different? Fiction tells me that it's going to be exactly like this. There is no food hall at university. There are food trucks and there are cafes that are the exact same brands and chains that you see outside, but they charge an extra $10 for exactly the exact same things that you see there, like $15 for a sandwich, a fucking chicken and corn sandwich. So I don't know who the fuck was getting fat at an Australian university. Ain't nobody, because that shit was expensive as hell. And like, also, this trope of an easy major, that did not fucking exist. I don't know where the shit that was supposed to be at. I mean, I was
I never went to a four-year
I was
university, so
doing,
I don't.
excuse me, I was doing film, and nobody was getting fat during film. So there was no like delicious, like sensual weight gain. There was no like, jerking off at the 18th hour, like with nothing else going on. No, and also like to be clear, my like indulgence of sex during university was truly like, well, I've been studying and I've completed 17 assignments, and you know what? Instead of crying myself to sleep, I think I'll try and masturbate and then I'll pass out halfway through. Like, films are fully like, all people do is go to parties and you can just fucking do that. Baby, if you don't dedicate every hour of your day to studying, like you're already behind, you're probably gonna fail. You miss like one class, guess what? That was the one class where they had everything that was going to be on the fucking exam. Oh, you think you can be sick? The class is at 6 a.m. Sucks to be you.
Exactly.
Versus the fantasy of this like dude who gets to get baked in his fucking dorm room and do nothing and like go to college and have this whole thing happen to him. It just no. No. And listeners, if that actually happened to you, you need to tell me which college you went to, and you need to name the course because I need to go to that college and that course. I don't want to go back to college for any fucking reason other than that. Give me the
Well, it's
name.
like I just said, it probably does represent a very specific cross section of college graduates, like the kind of people who write these stories may or may not have actually lived those experiences, or at the very least, they fantasize that this is what that experience must have been like. And for some gainers, that could be the truth. I don't know. I haven't met any yet, but it's possible.
But obviously, rant aside, this is a part of what this episode is going to have to be about, right? Unpicking this very popular, very fun fantasy and talking about how it actually plays out, right? So, for each of y'all, tell us about your gaining journey so far, how it's intersected with your college experience. Has college made gaining easier? Or, if like me, you walked into college with this expectation of the freshman 15, were you kind of rudely challenged by the realities of the situation?
For me, I felt like during college, or I'm still in college, but the college experience of having a freshman 15, I think I think for me it was slightly more attainable. And I only say that because I'm going to a college where I can also live on campus. And when you live on campus, they offer, a dining hall and usually in American universities, just to generalize, but a lot of them have buffets. So I felt like my first year, I didn't even think about the freshman 15. But as I went into my sophomore year, I figured that I thought like, why not? Because I have all the food that you could eat, and I can make that decision. So why not see what's happened? And so I know for some people, the expectation wouldn't really have that because we'd be studying a lot. I know for at least my first 2 years, I didn't really have any extremely intense classes where I was, sat at the desk all day. It was a little bit less than that. So in that regard, I guess I'm a little bit, grateful as for being a gainer. But I will say that if you really try, I think the fantasy could become reality. But I think that would limit I'm going to speak from personal experience. From my personal experience, I felt like it limited certain things, such as like social events or I guess experiencing campus life and studying. So it does get in the way if you choose to prioritize that. And if you choose to prioritize that fantasy. So that was my experience.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the 4 years, it's really been up and down. I came in already at a pretty big size. I was at 250, and because I had a lot of accidental COVID gains, which was the end of high school for me. But starting freshman year, yeah, there was definitely the thought in my head of, okay, I've got the buffet style dorm. It's literally downstairs. I lived in the same building as it, so I didn't even have to like get out of my friggin' pajamas to go and get food, except for the fact that my dorm dining hall had some kind of limited hours, so that made things occasionally challenging. I think it was more that while I enjoyed the idea, I never went into college with the explicit goal of gaining weight. It was more kind of like, if it happens and life kind of brings me in that direction, I don't have a problem with that. And I mean, actually, really through my entire time in university, it was kind of more like I'd gain in waves where I'd just have like 2 weeks to 2 months ish of just kind of like, all right, I'm prioritizing this for a little bit, and then various commitments, either my extracurriculars, my study, sometimes family commitments on occasion would kind of bring me out of that. And then I just kind of go back to maintaining for a while. And I really did this back and forth for the entirety of my time. I mean, my smallest point was in the middle of sophomore year. I was down to 230 at that point, and my highest is where I'm at now, or well, I guess like 3 months ago at like 275. It's been a wave the whole way through.
I'd be curious because you're are actively gaining, and as much as you say, like it's in waves, right? Like, and sometimes people try to create this division, like you actively gaining, like I live in my body and I eat the food, right? Like, am I like intentionally like gouging my fucking self right now, or am I like taking it easy? Like, those are kind of more the modes, right? But like, as you are right now in college, the pair of you, do you get people who are sort of reaching out and being like, oh my God, you're in college? Oh, you must be going for the freshman 15. You must be going to fucking live up this life. Tell me all about that. Like, do you get people kind of like romanticizing, fetishizing the fact of you being in that situation and kind of like projecting that onto you? Or do you get people asking earnest, genuine questions, being like, hey, I might be going to college next year. Like, can I ask you some legitimate questions about weight gain stuff? Like, tell us more about that.
I didn't really have the intent of gaining weight necessarily. Well, nor was it really talked about as like or fetishizing it really. And I only know that from my experience, but I do know there are people out there that really do, and they want to see someone really gain a lot because of just that culture of, those extra 15 pounds because, you're at college. But I do know as someone who lives in suburbia, it is actually, or at least like neighborhood dads have talked about it and or I guess like joke about it as like a warning, like, oh, don't gain the freshman 15. But I've actually never really heard anyone really say it out loud besides that. Nor do I think students in college are really thinking about that specifically.
I almost feel like the concept of the freshman 15 has maybe in some ways fallen out of the zeitgeist. I don't know. It's just like it. I agree with Scott entirely. There's just not as much weight to it. I don't get people necessarily asking me like, oh, like, yeah, I mean, every once in a while I'll get someone who like is kind of talking about like, oh, take advantage of the dining hall, or like, I hope you did. And if I'm talking to another college age guy, I might throw that out too, because I'm like, it's it's a fun little flirty statement kind of deal. I think what I get a lot of actually is guys way outside my age range who definitely reach out, and I'm just, they're very fascinated in the fact that a man 20 plus years younger than them is able to do is I guess able to kind of get large. I don't know. I tend to steer clear and
there are
don't
chicken
pursue those.
hawks and there are chicken hawks in every community. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I tend to steer clear of that for the most part. It's not those conversations don't tend to go far. I think what I actually kind of feel more as a freshman 15 experience is more like at times wanting to impose on myself that kind of a desire to really push, because there are a handful of people that I'll see who, I mean, basically who are actually succeeding at that. There's one guy I follow on Grommr who's down at a college about 4 hours south of me, and he has done more than that. He's done more like a freshman 50, 60 type deal. And it's just kind of like, or more, okay, I should say college 60, but still, seeing those kinds of people who actually are following that fantasy and are able to live it out, sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, well, is this something I should be doing as a gainer in this demographic? I mean, I've come to realize like, no, it's not really necessary. I got my own life to live, but it's definitely a thought that's crossed my mind.
As someone who maybe has kind of scratched the surface a little bit of that fantasy, I've gained 38 pounds since my time, and I felt like as a gainer that you could choose to utilize it, but it wasn't necessarily your intent. Or how do I put this? It kind of feels like this is your chance to really go at it because it is buffet style. Nothing in life essentially is going to be very similar to that. And especially if someone, once you get out of college, having like the knowledge of, hey, I might not be loaded, so I can like spend all this money on food. So this might be my one chance to really get a really good start. And so then I'm set when I am, living with a ton of roommates and I have $5 to my name. So I think that push initial is sometimes what drives people to push past the 15 and get it and achieve that fantasy or go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was first kind of joining the community, and I'm not sure what the rhetoric is now, but certainly when I first joined, people would often say, like, oh, if you're not sure about weight gain, gain 15 pounds, gain 20 pounds, like, see how you feel about the process of a weight gain journey and see how it sits with you. And sure, maybe there's an argument that in some places in the world, it's the perfect storm of opportunities that allows for someone to really go for that. But certainly, I think it comes down to, and it's interesting. I feel like we've always got this sense of unpacking what is and what isn't when it comes to gaining. We romanticize this idea that obesity must be so easy because we see people in the world who just seem to magically gain weight at the drop of a hat, but we're not having conversations about how genetics plays a huge factor into who is already fat versus who is not already fat, and why it might be that those of us who started off as skinny seem to have to put in a lot more hours at the table to gain the same kind of results as people, if people can sustain that. Also, how, like, as you say, if you have a dining hall package, like, that's a sustained food source that you can milk for all it's worth, really. But when you're an adult in the real world and you have your 9 to 5 and your mum is not paying your bills, you have to pay the tax man first. You got to pay your rent and your bills and your car and your gas and your everything else before you put food on the table. And by that point, as you say, maybe you've only got a couple of dollars to your name, and it's a question of like, well, how do I do this? And so I think maybe a dining hall is great, but again, like, I didn't learn how to cook at university. I didn't learn how to make use of materials, even though I had a kitchenette that I could have been doing stuff with. I didn't need to be fucking doing a roast in the oven every Sunday. But it would have been fucking nice to know how to, like, make rice into something decent. Like, again, that thing of it's a nice fantasy, but the lived experience of being like a grown adult making the gains happen for yourself is very much like there is no one footing the bill. It is me. I have responsibilities that must come first. And usually that's like my big gripe. If someone's sort of like, oh, what are you having for lunch? And I'm like, oh, I'm just having this. Oh, is that all? Yes, that's what my budget allows for. You fucking moron. Shut up. Here is my PayPal link. Don't at me. I swear to God, I'm not nice to people about this shit no more. If you are that invested in my shit, you can fucking run me my change.
I actually want to add on to that if I can.
Yeah.
I moved out of the dorms for my second year, so I have been living off campus for both my third and fourth year of university. And in doing so, I don't have a dining hall plan. And so though I don't have necessarily all of the, in-depth bills. I don't have my own place. I got 5 other roommates. Like I had to learn how to cook at the start of my junior year because I didn't really know how to do that until that point. And my roommate taught me, of all people. And I kind of had to, reevaluate how I would, continue trying to, pursue gaining off of a grocery budget and like making food for myself because I can't eat out every single day as much as I really wanted to. Like, I think that's to say that in college, depending on where you go or what you're doing, that can be part of the college experience itself as well.
So do you think that, like, I know that we could kind of probably trace the origin of this particular trope to either something that came from fiction, something that happened a lot in films, television, whatnot. Do you think it still inspires any gainers today? Like, do you think that there are some people who, some guys or folks who go off to college, gain some weight, and it kind of inspires them into this world? Do you think that that still happens?
I think it can happen. I don't know anyone personally, but I think so because I think, and I've read about a lot of studies that show that yes, a lot of college students, it's still a fantasy and a myth, but some who live on campus do gain weight, maybe like 3 to 4 pounds, nothing much, but some people may have unlocked in a desire because they've seen themselves maybe slightly pudgier and they're like, oh, I didn't know I'd like that. Maybe let's push for it a little bit. Or if yeah, I just yeah, I think maybe just liking what happens to them, and then maybe that can unlock something deeper, or maybe they go to the gym on their campus if they have one, and they get beefier and they get slightly chubbier. So a change in lifestyle could, and change in what you look like can increase that desire to gain.
I think it's also the element of additional freedom and not necessarily being under your parents' guidelines as much as you used to be. It definitely leaves a lot of room for, increased exploration. I can't say I've ever met someone who is like that, who just kind of like accidentally put on some in college and then realized, oh, they want to do more. But I have no doubt that that exists.
And then sometimes do you ever just think that maybe that this whole trope started because of guys who wanted to write fiction about the boys that they had fantasies of in high school? Like they don't know what happened to these guys in college. So this is just what they decided to project, and that somehow became its own thing.
So, like, that's also another thing that we've certainly come to uncover a lot in the community. Like, it's very interesting how much of Gain of Fantasy is, yes, fantastical, and, like, we know that. But, like, I don't know that I see this happening in, like, other communities, like furries, pups, ABDL, macro, right? Like, I don't see people getting the wires crossed so firmly within the realms of, like, what is physical and what is not. What is possible, right? Versus what is clearly fantastical. And again, I wonder, and I'm not trying to pathologize this particular point, but just like, this comes up in fat liberation so much. Like, thin people do not know what fat people look like. They do not know what the weight on the scale is meant to translate to the physical appearance of someone. They don't know about the intersections of like what it's like to be a fat person. They literally don't. The whole movie, The Whale, is a skinny man's like fucking jack off fantasy to like, oh, this is what it must be like to be 600 pounds, you're about to die, oh my god. Like, that's all it is. But it's like thin people who clearly don't have any fucking fat friends either because they're gonna just as a bitch. So I don't know, like, I wonder sometimes, like, if that's really what it comes down to. Yes, we have this desire, but like, for those of us who don't know, like, it all operates out of like a almost like I'm trying to will this into existence almost. And I wonder if like that's this thing of the freshman 15. I'm trying to will this into the justification, the excuse. I'm trying to weave this into my reality. What do you all think?
Yes, I think people are really pushing for it to actually be a thing, and there have been studies, and it's not that much. And that's the reality is it really isn't that much, if any. So it just kind of feels like it's just very pushed, and it's just a narrative being pushed, and especially from skinny culture in the suburbs. People think 4 pounds is so much, so they make it such a bigger deal than it is because it's terrifying to them if a 4 pound gain, if that, in college. So I think that's why it's blown up.
It doesn't help that a lot of times when it's represented in media, it's done this really comedic, stupid thing. Like, I mean, one of the most egregious examples I can think of in recent years was that one episode of Glee where Blaine put on like, was it 5 pounds from eating cronuts and couldn't button his khakis anymore. And like, and then it turned into this whole ridiculous storyline about him cheating on Kurt with online porn and all this shit. I was like, why is this happening? But it's like, and it's again, it's feeding into the trope of like, oh, he's not living at home anymore. He's on his own. He's putting on weight. Things aren't working out. Like, it starts with this snowball of the storyline, and I'm like, why does it always begin with the weight gain, and then it's just progressively things get worse?
Well, I think because like and again, not trying to pathologize here, but for so long, fatness is used as a very easy shorthand for evil, for villainy. Ursula as a character is an incredible fat woman who is always in her power. But the reason why we know immediately that she is evil when we see her is because she is fat. She has these lines, Flotsam Jetsam, look at me, wasting away to practically nothing, when she's clearly enormous. And the idea that she wants all the power for herself, it's a lot of lip licking, it's a lot of indicative that she's going to eat, to consume, all of this, which is why when she has the trident, she becomes this absolutely gigantic sea kraken, right? And the way in which fat people are fucking treated in general. Like, every other form of, like, because they make it about health, right? Every other form of health, you would not describe cancer as morbid. Or you've got morbid cancer. You're gonna fucking die from this. You've got morbid diabetes. You've got morbid this. But you've got morbid obesity. There is such a stringent moral attached to the idea of being fat. So I think it's so easy to be like, oh, they're starting to put on weight. Look at them. They're losing control. They're starting to become this blubberous, gigantic, monstrous, evil villain consumed by their own hubris. And the moment you paint it very plainly, you can filter through and think of like 1,000 different TV shows where you saw that happen in an episode, or where that was a film trope, or that was a rumor about a thing, or a reality star. It happens all the fucking time. There is a question I would actually like to ask you both, though. Because we've talked a little now around how ultimately this sort of freshman 15 is a very firm fantasy. And as you described, Austin, that men of even a far greater age than yourself still hold with a lot of fervor, shall we say. I want to ask you both this. As you've gone on your gaining journey, and let's say maybe when you started, you had an idea of the things that you enjoyed, the fantasies, the role play, the notions of what you thought everything could be, right? You had that. You've been on your gaining journeys now for a period of time. Have those fantasies shifted? And if so, tell us about that.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is, as time has gone on, I've gotten way more realistic in my aspirations. And I suppose some of the fantasies I've kept the same, but like the career I've chosen for myself, I'm going to be on my feet 24/7. Like, it's just a very physically demanding and active career. And so, like, yes, I have these dreams of going and achieving great heights of like 400, 450 plus, but realistically, I don't think I would be able to physically maintain, the lifestyle that I want to pursue. And again, my choice career much above 300. Like, and even then, I worry about that being a stretch. It's not to say that I don't want to try and don't want to actually test the boundaries, but I found that as I've kind of come into my own and come to understand what I need to prioritize in my life, there's just less of that fantasizing there in general. I think I've become much more grounded, perhaps for better or for worse.
I think I'm thinking similarly in that, you know, after not being in college for a little bit, you kind of just you face the reality of, hey, this gorging, this stuffing lifestyle of unlimited access to food is very hard to obtain, and especially with, life moving so quickly and having different things besides gaining in your life, I think the fantasy has changed to where you kind of just want to be like, okay, my goal is just to, maybe a pound a week or other week. And you do it by like a one sweet treat or two sweet treats or whatever. And that is a little bit more attainable because that is all you can afford, or all that you have time for. So I think the little moments in people's lives and in terms of gaining, that is the fantasy, not a whole like year of it, just small moments.
Something that helps me put things in perspective is knowing that like a lot of the guys that I've followed over the years are around my age, and like some of the guys that I really looked up to and idolized over the years are even older than I am, and they've had ups and downs. Like they, at points when they weren't sure with their careers or things weren't as settled and established, they couldn't gain as much, and now that their careers are pretty settled, they can. And that, I have to remember that it's a long journey for some of us. Some of the guys that like I said, I've looked up to are now in their 50s and 60s, so I still have a way to go. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating when you see someone who is relatively new to the game manages to make a leap forward in a very short amount of time. But that's always going to happen. That's always going to happen. There's always going to be people who are just genetically able to do that.
Yeah.
So I have to try to remember that.
If a gainer has the privilege to have access to have rapid gains and growth for whatever that intercession point is, that is a wonderful thing that they should do without hesitation. Because the reality is that if any other one of us could do it, bitch, wouldn't we? Yes, we the fuck would. And you would not want anyone else to tell you to slow the fuck down because they were feeling a type of way about it. So that's what that is. But what I'm saying is, I think there are more gainers who will struggle to gain weight. There are more gainers in the community collectively who will have a slower journey than the fantasy of the freshman 15, of the freshman 50. There's more gainers in the community that will have to find all of the little ways, just like you were saying, Scott, to work acclamations of gaining into their day-to-day life. And we don't talk about that. The fact is, we're doing an episode about the freshman 15. For me, over a decade after I finished off with university, as you said, Austin, like, who's talking about this necessarily anymore? But it still holds such a point of prominence in our minds that we think, well, this must be something. And we're holding on to this idea, but nobody's having conversations about, how you get the most out of your money in an economy where food prices are going up, and how you learn to make the most calorie dense meals out of the most bulk friendly food that stores the longest. I don't need someone to come at me with another gainer shake that is 15 parts cooking oil. I need you to explain to me why this recipe you've come up with is going to have a long enough shelf life that I can make it, keep it in my fridge, and it's actually not going to rot in 2 days, because I can't eat 15 gallons in 2 days. I'm a human being trying to make this work. And it is a lifestyle that you have to build and create, and yeah.
I was just gonna say, and I agree on the topic of lifestyle. I think maybe some of that idea originating it comes from just having a new lifestyle as a college student and trying to adjust to that. If someone has unlimited access to food, they're trying to adjust to that. So I think that is where, especially going off on your own to college, that is where all these things start to happen or start to shape. So that's all I have to
And
say.
I would assume that for people who are not into any actual act of physical sex, who are maybe like belly sexual, that this is kind of their form of experimentation. in college. You know, it's like those are the years where you're no longer under certain moral strictures. You're probably going to a college with a very diverse campus student population, and you're allowed to experiment for the first time. And so, for people who are just into the body worship, this is like that experimentation, that first leap, that foray into not only your life as a, you know, hopefully someday out and proud fetishist, but also, you know, it could be, you know, the first time you're experimenting with someone of the same gender. So,
Absolutely. I mean, I was not ready to start really interacting with others in this community until the start of my sophomore year. So I had like just turned 19, and that's when I finally made my Grommr account. I could have done it earlier, but leaving high school, that was just not something I was comfortable or ready for. But it was, in that experience, in like finally feeling, comfortable enough to really explore this identity in more depth than just what the internet had to offer, that has given me some of the most affirming moments of my life in terms of my sexuality, because I strongly relate to the billisexual idea. We got a lot more to figure out there, but there's very little that appeals to me outside of that. And it was through the handful of experiences I've had in my college days so far that have kind of, yeah, that have really taught me that no, that is what I want for myself. Trying things that really didn't work, trying things that do work, meeting people that I can actually maintain a conversation with versus meeting the fantasy like twink chasers who just don't understand how it really works. Uh, yeah, that's actually really the end of my point.
I mean, I think as a fiction trope, it'll probably remain for a while. But like I believe we were talking about earlier in the conversation about the zeitgeist, I do think it would eventually be phased out because, again, to hammer home the point that it's kind of speaking to a very specific demographic. I think that that's why it's most likely not going to stick around much longer. It's very of its time.
I mean, something that's worth considering, because I can reflect on Tumblr days of the early 2010s when I was at university, and I can reflect on even the Yahoo group days of the early 2000s. The guys that we were thirsting over back then were truly like college guys that had put on 15 pounds. Like, I can remember a time in the zeitgeist of gaining where, yeah, there were people who grew past 300 pounds, but that almost seemed more the rarity, right? And the desire was very much those delicious first few pounds, that sort of potential that you might see in someone where it's like, ooh, if they've put on 5, 10, 15, maybe they could put on even more. And, we're starting to see where they're filling out. And if you see this, it's almost, I suppose, like the trope of back in the old days when it's like, oh, we can see their ankles. Then we could start to envision like what everything else looks like. So things move, and they shift and they change, and I think that's fine. But actually, I want to put this out there to the pair of you, like, for anyone listening who is contemplating college and maybe they're around your age bracket, I want to ask you both, what is an aspect of the sort of college experience, especially as it pertains to gaining, that you wish you had been more aware of before you rocked up to college?
My answer here is honestly actually more about like very casual societal fat phobia. And I wanted to mention this several times now, where it's like, honestly, I don't think of the freshman 15 much in a gaining context because it is overall not super relevant to me. It just has not been super important in my personal gaining experience. What I think of it more in the context of is just kind of like being around people who are going to like call their friend a fat ass because they had a big dinner once in front of them, even though the person's fully just like, completely average weight. I see this primarily, well, no, actually it's been in every single circle I've been, from like my straight guy friends to, other queer folk in some of the music stuff that I'm involved with. Like it's just kind of everywhere. So I think the thing that you really have to prepare yourself for is not, eh, you're gonna hear those things. People are gonna say stupid shit that they would never say to your face as a fat person, but they're gonna say to their friends who are not, and they're gonna continue to. Yeah, it's almost it's really like the de facto stigmatization of being fat, really, when there is nothing there for it. I mean, for God's sakes, like the amount of people who are fully average weight around me and they're like throwing jokes to each other about like, oh my God, you're so fat, ah ha ha, like, and they or like throwing around like eating disorder jokes and stuff. That is often more difficult to be around. So it's you got to prepare yourself to maintain your self assurance and your confidence in yourself, and you know, your, I guess, yeah, your assurance in the kind of person you want to be, in the weight that you want to gain, even in those environments.
Yes. I feel like my experience is very similar. I was nodding along all the time because with me, I felt like when you start to put on that weight or even just existing, I think just people find you as like a punching bag, a way to kind of joke and do all that stuff. So then it's just plain fat phobia. I know what I was thinking while you were speaking was well, at least in Gen Z, the big back trend of calling someone a big back because ate a lot for one meal. That trend, it got out of control, and I was called it multiple times, and this was before I gained. So I was just like, I'm not like, but even so, it just like I said, it's just fat phobia, but it's stigmatizing that the feeling of this is an action that could result in, weight gain, and that is seen as bad. And that is, so like I said, it's just very stigmatized.
I do get the sinking suspicion that this trope will survive in one form, and that is when it comes down to the jock. Like, the guy that goes to college on the sports scholarship and, puts on a lot of weight, whether he's playing football or baseball or whatever. And that will most likely always survive because there are, because as much as cis hetero society doesn't want to admit it, women find men who are both athletic and chubby really hot. Like, I mean, like my boyfriend was on a rugby team that was both gay and straight, and like all of the wives were these hot wives with these guys that were like muscular but chubby, and they all talked about how much they loved that their men were like that. Like, women find that hot, so I think that probably is what's going to keep that particular thing alive.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, frankly, when I'm reflecting on these fantasy tropes, like it is only ever the jock. Like I don't know that I ever read a fantasy fiction about like the STEM kid gaining the weight. It was always the jock who had to eat. So once again, like we're finding this tie-in, and we talked about this before, like in I think back in all the way back in season one, I think it might have been. We were talking about how people love to say like gaining is not a political thing, but it's like all the fantasies are around like cis het masculine white men getting fat, and like the most masculine of those tropes, which is sport ball, right? So, again, it's if we do a little bit of unpacking, the root of some of these is really quite shallow. Tim?
I was going to say there is one exception. The STEM kid fan or gainer fiction that does happen if it's instantaneous weight gain and they've developed some kind of magic
Oh yeah,
formula.
because
That is when it's the STEM kid.
they're allowed to be the big fat science nerd. Yeah, exactly. Like they have to have glasses, and it has to be very what's that show Urkel? Didn't he like develop a fucking
Oh, Family Matters.
yeah? Didn't he
Family
develop
Matters. Is that what
something
you're
that
talking about?
turned him into things and shit like that?
He developed some kind of serum or something that turned him into his
Like a cool
suave
version of
twin. Yeah,
you know,
Stefan or Kel.
again, same concept, right? Like the
Yeah.
nerd.
Well, it's the Nutty Professor thing, it's the
Sure.
or the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah. Again, same diff, right? Like it's you are allowed to be the nerd if you are useful. You still have to perform the role of being useful because, of course, the fantasy is, oh, I'll take that potion for myself, versus the fantasy of the jock. And I was about to say ex jock. It's not ex jock. It's jock because you're at college and you're there on a scholarship. The idea is like big, fat, dumb, useless, lazy. let him be the hedonist, let him have everything that he deserves to have. Again, very like traditional white cis masculine trope of, oh, allow me to provide this person everything that their heart desires because they are the pinnacle human, they deserve all of the things, right?
Well, and it has very, just realizing has a lot of connotations of like a pig being fattened for slaughter.
Yeah. Like there's the fantasy of the jock is mean and gets what he wants because he'll take it from you. There's the fantasy of the jock will get his comeuppance because he's fattened himself into a pig, ready for the abattoir. Like there's all of these tropes, and it's very, again, the fantasy is very strong. And there's no, I want to be clear here, fantasy is fine because it's all in your head. It's not reality. But as we're unpicking from this episode, we as a community really struggle with differentiating between fantasy and reality because so many people will still look at the concept of the freshman 15 and are like, yeah, but it must work, right? Like there must be something to that, there's a reason why. But like, as we've uncovered today, unless you exist at the perfect intersection of things, like it probably won't happen that way. And if you're a gainer at college, you have to be a lot more mindful about how you approach your gains. And all I can say to that is I wish I had been aware of that when I went to university. It's not why I went to university, but I certainly spun my wheels the first few years because no one told me. I had to figure it out on my own after 3 to 4 years why I hadn't gained a pound. Like, because shit didn't work like that, not really. And to that point, I want to ask you both this, and this is not for the purpose of Tim and I to be indulgent here. Are there any questions you'll have that you would like to ask your aunties?
I don't have a specific question, but I think honestly, what you guys done with this podcast has really informed a lot of, or at least me, has informed, what the journey can look like and not just, showing multiple different you did not just dab right now. Multiple different perspectives. Oh, what was my point? Oh, well, whatever. My point was just I like what you guys do here, and I think you offer something very unique in the gainer community of showing different perspectives, showing the reality of the situation. And I think with this episode, really differentiating the two between fantasy and reality. And freshman 15 trope is very common that we see in media. So I think it was good to unpack it this episode.
I mean, honestly, Scott shared any thought I would have had. I don't have much else to add. That's part of the reason why, like, when I had the offer to, when Scott messaged me saying, like, hey, this is happening, that's why I agreed to come on, is because it's like, this podcast really is something that is I don't know. I hope you guys realize how informative it is for people who are like trying to figure it out. Because especially earlier on in my college years, where I was listening this like in my walks to and from class or something like that, or I'd just pop on an episode where it's like, oh, I know that like guest star, or like, oh, this is a topic that is very relevant to me right now. It's basically just having a place to finally listen to people who are dissecting the weird complex emotions that come with exploring this world. It means a lot, and I'm honored to be part of it.
That's extremely humbling. And, it just put it into perspective for me that, I take for granted that we've been on the air for 5 years, which means that, like, we've kind of been with you for your journey through your education. And that's incredible that you've been listening to us for that long. And it's just one of those moments where you realize that, like, you haven't just been talking out your ass for 5 years, you know?
Thank you for receiving us as we are. We're not trying to be anything other than what we are. So it's nice to know that what we are is received in a positive light.
And we
Yes,
would
definitely.
definitely love if we could inspire more things out there in the Gainerverse. So if you have the idea, just go for it, but be prepared to work because, that's what we do. We come home from our 9 to 5s and we work on this. So,
You know, maybe that is advice we could offer here. It's something that the pair of you have spoken of a lot during this recording. The work that is involved when it comes to creating the life that sustains growth is a lot more work than what the fantasy details that it is. We actually have been working on a thing recently where it's involved us reading a lot of some of the older fiction works, like some of the Warren Davis stories. And it is just incredible how much, like when you look at it through like sober lens, that it's just the answers to all of this was magic, was happenstance, was a situation that just frankly would never fucking happen, not in a million years. And so this is perhaps the only true bit of advice. Like Tim said, it does take work, right? But both of you all are really clued in already. Scott, as you were saying, sometimes it is about introducing little bits and pieces incrementally. One, to match where your capacity is at, and two, to kind of wean yourself onto the notion of having change and changing again and adapting to bigger and different things. You know, Austin, you've really conveyed a sense of reality in understanding your own limitations, but also reflecting on your own desires and, you know, walking that line. You're walking into a career where you are going to logically be on your feet. All of those tropes that we lean on to have a desk job, to do this, to do that, you're not necessarily going to have, but you already know that you're not going to have that. So rather than sitting there spinning your wheels going, gosh, what am I going to do about this? You already know, well, I can't fuck with that. So now I've got to think and do something different. And I've got to find something that's going to work for me so that I can live my full, fulfilled life. Not just getting fatter, but being a happy fat person, period, in the world. Protecting fat joy. Protecting your peace. Especially at a time in the world when shit feels very, you know, all up in the air and whoop-de-woo. So that I would offer is maybe the advice. It do take work. Lord knows it takes work. But I think the sooner many of us can come to grapple and come to terms with the work that is necessary, creating the foundation of what needs to come first to sustain the gains, then it's actually going to be a lot easier to slot different things in. Changes to the diet, changes to lifestyle, all sorts of bits and pieces.
I have found that the best connections that I have made in this community are with people who are not afraid to have real discussions and who are not afraid to sit down and like for a while and like just break down or yeah, actually to philosophize about gaming really and to really understand it for what it is. So less a question, but more just kind of like we need so much more of that. We really do. And I think that I think bringing people into just having honest reflection is going to do a lot more for our community, at least in my perspective. And I'm thankful that there is a place that is doing this so publicly.
I was just gonna say, if you're someone that is listening and you've never really had a conversation with another gainer like this, like I think this is a good platform to encourage you to have those conversations with other gainers and just to ask like to you know relate to each other on a personal level, like what this means for both of you, not just what's your goal, what your you know, but the intricacies of it. I think in general that can create a stronger online community. And yeah, I feel like that is what is so needed right now is community and coming together and being united.
Again, the breaking down of the fantasy and living in the reality, not just your fantasies and the way you live your gaming journey, like we've been talking about, but also the community that you have and the stock you put in people. And as gainers, don't we deserve to have more? Don't I deserve love, jewelry?
And shopping and jewelry.
Oh God, you two are probably too young to know about Adam's family values.
No, incorrect. I've watched.
You have. Okay. Austin, answer the question.
I don't have much to say. I plead the fifth.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, actually, this is now the launch pad for Tim's brand new podcast where he drags you children by the ear and sits you in front of the sofa and introduces you to bloody queer, bloody buggery motherfucking culture.
Listen, I know Rocky Horror through and through. Give me that, okay? Come on. I know old musicals. I know Broadway. That's my background. I don't know Adam's Family, though. I missed that one somehow.
Okay. I promise you, you will enjoy Adam's Family. It's so camp. It's wonderful. But yeah. Yo, I think this brings us to the end of the episode. I think it's been an amazing conversation. I want to say thank you to the pair of you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a great experience talking to all of you guys.
Of course. Now, where can our listeners find each of you online?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram, softcubby_Scott, or on Grommr.
Instagram or Grommr under Geneticub. Yeah, that's really it.
Well, that's it for another week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, our guests, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at ThiccMouse and Grommr at Orpheus. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate to our PayPal, and you can always write to us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
with original theme music by CYMK.